Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to this edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek, and I've got a very good interview today. But before that, I wanted to cover a couple of things with you guys and bring you up to date. The Pest Geek Academy is coming along. We're still recording classes. But that is coming. So stay tuned to that. So letting you know about that. Also, guys, if your phone is not ringing, if you've been on the fence about getting maybe an 800 toll-free number, or maybe getting a vanity number, like 1888 got bugs, or an easy to remember number like 1-800-600-500 to increase the ease of your customers getting a hold of you, contacting you, this is the time you might want to do this. Now, Ring Boost, which is one of the nation's largest provider of these services, came to us and said, hey, would you be interested in promoting this on your podcast? And of course I said yes. What he said is, hey, look, we're going to do a 15%, and if we're going to give you a custom page. So we've got our own page, which is, I'll tell you right now, ringboost.com/pest. If you put in pest 15 at checkout, you look for your number, get the number because you can do this right on their website. If you use our link and the promo code, which is pest 15, hey guys, you get 15% off. You can do the search right there, buy it right there online. Hey, if you guys appreciate what we're doing here, you appreciate what I'm doing, what Stephen Van Tassel is doing, trying to bring you the best free content, and be the world's #1 pest control training podcast that is free. If you enjoy it, hey, would you consider donating, supporting us? It's easy. Just go to pestgeekpodcast.com, hit the donate button, and whatever you feel that this podcast is worth to you, go ahead and support us. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And without further ado, here is our guest.
I'm Stephen Van Tassel here, living the wildlife for Pest Geek podcast. Thanks you all for listening. Today I have a special guest, Richard Shevelow of Pica Development / Skyhawk. He is the owner and operator of this production company, manufacturing company that's producing Skyhawk for trap monitoring systems. And so welcome.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being on the show for the Pest Geek podcast. So wanted to talk, your product's relatively new. When did it start? When did you first enter production?
Well, the first production units the first prototype units, I should say, probably came out about 18 months ago. It was officially launched back in October of 2019. So we've been out for about 4 months. It's been in the hands of trappers for about a year now.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the product. You're a trap monitoring device. Talk about how your product, what it does, what it doesn't do, how it's different from, because there's several on the market presently.
Yeah, this device is based on cellular technology, and it's really taking advantage of technology that the network operators such as Verizon, AT&T, and others launched about 2 or 3 years ago. And the technology has enabled a device that operates on 2 or 3 AAA batteries to be placed out in the field, out in the woods, anywhere there's at least a weak cellular signal, to be out in the field monitoring sensors, various types of sensors, and the batteries will last for 3 years, 3 AAA batteries. And that's a real game changer that has been enabled by the carriers launching a version of what's called low power wide area network technology. And we have leveraged upon that new technology.
And what is it? What does it cost?
The retail price of the hardware is $99, and the subscription cost is as low as $8 a month for a 2-year subscription.
And what does that get? So you have to pay is it just one subscription fee no matter how many devices you have out there, or is it tied? Is it $8 a month per device? Because each one is attached to a specific trap. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's for basically each device is its own little cell phone. Is a way to look at it.
Okay.
It has, it basically comes with, actually, when somebody purchases a device, then they register it when they're ready to use it on the cell network using a credit card to activate it. And each one comes with, after you do the registration process, you're basically registering through us, but on, in our case, the Verizon network.
Verizon network. And you chose Verizon because?
They're known to have the best, most ubiquitous coverage in the U.S. And they cover a lot of areas where some of the other carriers don't have coverage, especially in the more rural areas. They're known to have geographically the most reliable coverage.
Well, that's certainly true here in Montana. You if you have anything other than Verizon, you leave a city, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
so nothing's working. That's why I kind of listen to some of these other advertisements, and they say, "Oh, we have all this coverage," and I'm like, "Really?
Yeah,
maybe not out here in Montana."
Yeah, they're focused. A lot of that can be misleading, in that they're focused on the bigger cities and populations, where Verizon has done a very good job of handling all geographic areas. There's some dead spots.
Sure.
But,
oh no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you get some of the mountains out here, you're not going to get cell coverage.
Yeah.
But that's not your target market, to be sure. Not a lot of wildlife control being done in the middle of national forest.
Yeah. In the south, the other interesting thing about this technology, it doesn't require a very strong cell signal. So there are areas where you can't make a call, but this technology, because it's a very low bandwidth technology, you can still make what's called a machine-to-machine connection. And kind of the general guideline is, if you're in an area where you can make a text, even though you can't make a phone call, you can get a text through, you can get a communication through to one of our devices.
Oh, wow. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about, because this is the Pest Geek podcast, we tend to get a little geeky here, and so it's kind of one of our what we're known for, to say the least. So let's get a little geeky here. So let's talk a little bit more about the device itself. How does it notify the wildlife control operator or the PCO that something's gone on with their trap? Does it use a photograph? Is it using sound? What is it using? How does
Good question. The current device, and trust me, there's going to be more coming down the road. The current device has 2 sensors built into it that are active 100% of the time, that use very low power in a standby mode. And the 2 sensors are, the first one's an accelerometer that can detect the sensitivity is set real high, which it can be adjusted on an app, but if the sensitivity is set real high, if you have our device laying on a desk and drop a coin on it, it'll detect that. The accelerometer in there can be set to very high sensitivity levels. The other sensor that's built into the device is a reed switch. And a reed switch works based on a magnetic field. Okay. So the device can be deployed in using both those sensors to detect movement, which would be initially a trap door closing.
Okay.
Then typically when an animal gets in a trap, it doesn't like that at first, and it doesn't go to sleep initially, and it moves around.
Right.
And it moves around.
So it's vibration, and so when you mean that reed switch, reed switch, is that sort of like when someone would put a little wire onto the trap doors that will then pull the two magnets apart when the door closes?
That's
or
correct.
Is that something that's correct? Okay, so you actually have two options. You can either use it with the motion sensor, or you can add the reed switch as another fail-safe to make sure you're going to know if the door closes.
Yeah, what we found is the vast majority of trappers who use this are, because it's such an easy setup. When you do the accelerometer-based sensing, it's virtually a 5-second setup, and you just put the device on the trap. It's just very easy to deploy, and I would say probably 80-90% of the existing trappers that use this just rely on the reed switch, and you tend to learn. Initially, you'll get a hit from the accelerometer, then you'll get a bunch more hits soon after that. Then, then typically, the animal will go to sleep after a while. Then you won't get additional movements. The current accelerometer setup, the current reed switch setup, takes a little bit more time, but there are some trappers that like to do that, and it also enables you to use it with other types of traps that, a pull trap where a snap trap or something can pull away a string that's connected to a magnet that removes it from the kiwi.
Right, like a conibear trap or a rat trap, other types of snap traps would be where you'd want to use that reed switch. All right, so you have a lot of flexibility with it. So let's talk a little bit more about what got your company into this particular market. It's a rather niche market. What was your motivation to move into this particular area?
Well, because we thought it had so much value. The Skyhawk division of Pika Product Development is focused on developing IoT products that will be very useful. There's going to be a lot of different vertical applications. This particular vertical application of trapping and pest control is a pretty easy one to deploy and use and get tremendous value out of.
And IoT means?
Internet of Things.
Oh, Internet of Things. Gotcha. Okay.
That's correct.
Do you have the option for someone to hook it up to Wi-Fi if they wanted to get off, didn't want to use cellular?
No.
Do you have the ability to add that to the device?
No, it's the problem with Wi-Fi is the power. With Wi-Fi, the idea of this device is just small, compact. Trying to hook things up with Wi-Fi, it's just the power requirements are a lot greater.
I see.
And it just our direction as a company is going to be based on cellular-based IoT applications, where we can deploy things out in the field that will last for years, monitor sensors, and notify users if those sensors go off. And one of the sayings we have is no power, no Wi-Fi, no problem.
Right. So let's talk about how some of the scenarios. So certainly when the trap is outdoors and you have regular self coverage, that should work fine. How about situations where people are inside of an attic or perhaps a concrete basement? How does your device work in those more difficult situations?
Very good question. One of the things about this cellular technology that Verizon and others are using, they tend to use the lower frequency bandwidths, and they have better penetrating power. I don't think, of the hundreds of devices we have out in the field today, I don't think we've run into one situation where somebody didn't have coverage and wasn't able to use the device.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they typically, because the amount of data that's being transferred with these notifications is very small. It's like around 500 bytes of data.
Okay.
And because of that, they can use these lower bandwidths, that lower frequencies penetrate better. And the coverage is pretty ubiquitous.
Right. Well, let me give you a sort of a hellish scenario that's completely unfair. So let me just say that out right away. How about inside of a walk-in freezer at an industrial plant? I don't know why someone would be trapping inside of a freezer, but wild animals do weird things. So if someone had a trap inside of a walk-in freezer, have you ever had it tested? Do you ever have someone walk into a freezer and see if it worked?
There's two issues there, and we've actually, not in walk-in freezers, but in regular freezers, we've tested the device. Now,
Really? Okay.
And I can't say that it would work in all walk-in freezers, but when you talk about a freezer, basically you're talking about something that's close to what's called a Faraday cage.
Right.
A Faraday cage is built to block RF signals, and a Faraday cage has to be built with gasketing around door closures and stuff. For a walk-in freezer, the gaskets are made out of rubber for insulation, and believe it or not, that's probably, in the vast majority of cases, leaky enough from an RF perspective to allow signals to get into.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's tough to build a Faraday. In fact, we have built a Faraday cage to test the device.
Yeah.
And I should say, we built what we literally did was took a big dog cage and wrapped it with wire mesh to make a Faraday cage. And unless we totally seal up the edges where the door closes and make a tight connection and seal it up, the signal still gets through.
Right. So for those in the audience who don't know what a Faraday cage is, if you've ever seen some, sci-fi type movies where a guy is inside of a big cage and lightning is flying all around him, that's a Faraday cage. So they're quite exciting and visually spectacular. And so the RF, I'm assuming when you use that acronym, you meant radio frequency. So that cage. Right, that cage sort of would prevent a radio frequency from leaking out of the field. But so it just shows you the level of power here. So let's get into the legal challenges.
Yeah. Can I step back on the refrigerator, the freezer thing? There's another aspect to that, because when you get into these low temperatures, everybody probably has. Many people have probably had an experience with devices, especially with rechargeable batteries. I can remember years ago skiing and having my cell phone with me, and if you're out in 0-degree weather, your battery goes dead.
Right.
It's not so much that the battery's dead, but it's when many battery technologies are at very low temperatures, the voltage drops on them. And we've developed the device around a special type of lithium technology that holds its voltage and operates very well down to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Ooh. So that's the other aspect of working in a freezer. You have to have batteries that work at the temperature that you're at. And it's a very important part of this technology. And if rechargeable batteries are notorious, rechargeable or lithium polymer typically,
Yeah.
and those voltages drop off pretty abruptly after you get down around 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit.
And that's why your product uses the disposable batteries.
That's one of the reasons. Yeah.
One of the reasons. Okay.
Yeah. And the probably the biggest reason, our product, you could put alkaline batteries in our product. But they wouldn't work at the lower temperatures, and they also would not give you as long life, because when the cellular signals, when the device goes off and sends a cellular signal, it draws pretty high power, and those tend to, for the lack of a better word, damage alkaline batteries, and you don't get the life out of alkaline batteries that you do out of these newer style lithium batteries. And quite frankly, the batteries that we use, the brand that everybody's familiar with is the Energizer Ultimate batteries.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of those batteries. I was just almost wanting to ask a question about that, because I use them in trail cameras, and it was based on a friend of mine's recommendation who did a lot of deer work with video cameras. He was doing research, and so that's what he used, and they were doing a study on animals going underneath highways and their use of pathways underneath major roads. And so lithium, the Energizer lithium battery Ultimate they were like, that's the one you get.
Yeah.
So
not to get too geeky, but there are a lot of different types of lithium batteries, and the particular chemistry in that is known as lithium iron disulfide.
Okay.
And that's why that's probably a little more detailed than people.
Well, it's important because our audience is busy, and they want recommendations on what is the best, because time is the biggest challenge for wildlife control operators. Less so for PCOs, but PCOs certainly have time crunches as well. But wildlife control is incredibly time intensive, because you're not leaving a pesticide, you're often leaving a trap, and you have to go back. So there's always, when you're making visits, generally you're coming back again, unless it's, you're doing an initial capture. So anything to reduce those visits. So I'm excited about some of this technology, because for a couple of reasons. Let's see if I'm missing anything from your marketing side. A, you're saving fuel and time. B, it can be helpful for situations that are high public visibility. Let's say you're having to remove an animal from a high traffic area, and you don't want a caged animal being there that's going to draw a crowd, like in a mall, or maybe a store, or maybe where children are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Also, places that have high security requirements. I've heard of guys using these types of devices in power plants, where every time they drive onto the plant, they have to have their vehicle basically investigated in case they're not carrying so that they confirm they're not carrying a bomb, unfortunately. Right? This is the world that we live in now. So anything that saves them from making an unnecessary trip would save them literally at least an hour just in them scoping out the vehicle.
That's correct. And we have, we understand there are kind of two broad segments of users that we have out in the field. The other segment that is the people that do the TNR people.
Trap, neuter, release. Yep.
Yeah, they've really latched onto this technology.
Sure.
Also.
How many states? Do you have a list of how many states allow this to be used as a trap check?
That's changing all the time. I kind of shy away from I think it's about 6 states, but
Okay.
some of the regulations are kind of open to interpretation.
Right.
And I we're actively working with a couple of states right now. In fact, just last week I sent one of our devices to a regulator that's actively writing regulations to allow this type of technology to be used to replace physical checking of the traps.
Right. Or to stand as or equal to physical checking of a trap.
That's correct. Yeah. In
So,
reality, everybody, people say, "Can I use it in my state?" Well, in reality, you can use it anywhere. You can use it in any state. The question, and you asked the question exactly right. The real legal question: does it replace the daily trap checking requirement?
right.
Yeah, but
And this is something I've been. So let me go on one of my hobby horses. I've been long advocating in our industry that we need wildlife control operators to band together to lobby state wildlife agencies to create regulations to govern wildlife control. A lot of wildlife control operators are governed under fur trapping regulations. And it's not quite apples and oranges, but it's sort of delicious apples versus Macintosh apples. We're cousins, but we're not the same. And so a lot of states will say you have to have a daily trap check. But they don't necessarily define. It's assumed it's going to be a personal check, and some of them will actually say you have to be there personally.
correct.
So the question and this is something for you out in the Pest Geek audience, advocate to allow this technology to be used. And this is something I think the animal rights protest industry should agree with us on, that it should be allowed because it actually will help. And at the same time, we want to be sure that even if it's not officially legal in your state, you can still use it in those places. Maybe you want to get that job over with faster, or maybe you're in a high risk area, or you just want to play with it. You can still check it physically or have your client check it depending on your regulations. But we need to advocate for this.
Yeah, and that's very actively. In fact, at the NUCOA convention in Vegas a couple months ago, I was at a working group, and there's been follow-up from that, and that's a very active effort going on now, at least in some states. And the fact that the TNR people have embraced this technology too should show that it's a win-win. It's a win-win all the way around. There are really no disadvantages to this. People just have to realize that it's practical, it's reliable, and now it's economical.
Right. Well, the one thing we'd be afraid of, and that is if the TNR, because cats are considered domestic animals in most states, so the rules for wildlife and the rules for domestics are a little bit different. But what I would be afraid of is that what the TNR folks would if I can divine their motivation or their goals here, would be that they would want to mandate this as required for all trapping, and I would be opposed to that.
We don't want to go down that path.
And then they would say you have to, then the animal has to be removed within a certain period of time of it triggering. So might have to be a 4 hours. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, you'd be driving. And this is where this could go. People say, "Oh, that's crazy." No, it's things of this nature are coming. But we certainly appreciate that. But we're getting a little far afield from our subject here. What I would like to know is that, can you talk a little bit about do you have an app? Do you have it for iPhone and Droid? Can you talk a little about your app if you have one?
Yeah, we have an app. It's called the Skyhawk CE app, which is for the consumer edition. I think is what CE actually stands for, because it's a one-to-one app where each device. There are other. This is really our first product. There are a lot of other products that are coming down the road shortly for this vertical application as well as other vertical applications. And that app will be flexible. It'll be able to, when you register one of these devices on the app, you basically take a picture of the barcode on the device. It'll recognize what kind of device it is. Then it'll open up an interface in the app that is specific to that device.
And for iPhone and Droid?
iPhone and Droid both. Yeah.
Both. And so when the device goes off, it's the app. Does it send you a text? Does it call you? Is it sending an email? What are the notification options that you have?
Three things, actually four really. It can send a text, it can send an in-app notification, and it can send an email. And you can enable any or all three of those. Then on the app, you can see the history. You can bring up a history of all the notifications on a particular device, and it keeps I think a 30-day running log on the app on how often it's been pretty cool to see the notifications. You learn a lot about the sleeping patterns of animals and stuff.
Yeah. The technology can really show us a lot. So what happens if, let's say I get a text, and is there something that let's say I got so busy I forgot I got the notification. Does the device send out another notification letting me know that, hey, the animal's still here? You need to reset this device, or how does that? Do you have something like that?
Well, if the animal woke up and started moving it again, it would let you know that it moved.
Okay. So there is a way to let you know that. So even if you got so crazy and you forgot about the initial notification, you would be notified again. So it's not a way that you shut that off then.
Well, you can. In fact, there's two aspects to that, because, and this brings up an interesting point. The battery, when you do a cellular-based notification, it's pretty power intensive.
Right.
It uses, and the batteries only, if the device is in standby monitoring sensors, it'll literally last 2 or 3 years. But if the device kept going off constantly, it would use up the batteries fairly fast. The device, with our current device with the AAA batteries, has roughly 2,500 notifications built into it.
Wow.
And that should last a while.
It should. Absolutely. So.
And we have there's two levels of keeping those in control. There's firmware on the device that has built, and I think it's adjustable, but the default is that the device won't notify more often than once a minute initially. Then after it gets 10 notifications, then it backs off that it will only notify you once an hour to prevent excess notifications from happening.
Right. And you can adjust that if through the app.
Yeah. Okay. And the people that have used this device now for 6 months or more, they've learned to control those so they're not getting excess notifications, and they'll have devices out in the field that last a year or two with one set of batteries.
Yeah. So one of the things we've had in earlier types of these sorts of devices that you've created, and that is, we've had situations where they were not positioned properly on the trap, and a raccoon would destroy them or damage them. Destroy may be too strong of a term, but they would be damaged. Is there a specific spot on the trap that you would tell someone to place the trap? Is there some way they need to shield the trap from prying hands of animals so that the device is not damaged? Or
another great question. We had a very well-known trapping company that one of their operators, he made a mistake, and he put the device inside the cage door after it closed. Not inside the trap, but it was reachable. It was on the outside of the trap, but reachable.
Yeah.
And boy, the raccoon tore it up pretty good, but it still worked.
Okay. All right.
He sent us a picture and said, I shouldn't have done this, but look, it still works. We've tested the device through mil-spec testing with drop tests and stuff, and we've gone through quite a few iterations to make it extremely robust. But the place the advice is to make it non-accessible after the trap door closes.
Yes. So either use 1/2 by 1 inch mesh traps or put it near the front toward, if you're using a spring-loaded door, put it toward the door on outside the trap on the top roof, so it would be very hard for a raccoon to reach it, because raccoons can reach about 6 inches. So if you're not using a 1/2 by 1 inch trap, well, good. Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that. I would like to start moving into where does someone obtain the product? Where would they find more information about the product? Talk about the dealers, suppliers, and then I would love to hear about the future products you have coming down the line. But otherwise, we can have another Pest Geek interview in the future when you start rolling out those products.
Yeah, the current, we understood who we have two very good distributors that really know this industry, and that's Tomahawk Live Trap and Wildlife Control Supplies. I very early on, actually, it was through Verizon. They turned me on to somebody from I think it was Plunkett. Yeah, it was Plunkett, and they. I spoke to somebody at Plunkett probably about 2 years ago, and that Plunkett person told me that the person to talk to about this is Alan Hewitt, and that's who WCS and Tomahawk Live Trap are our first two distributors. We also sell it online on our website, skyhawk.com, sky-hawk.com, but we enjoy working through those two distributors and understand how helpful they've been to the industry and for decades.
Yeah, Alan Hewitt just won the Lifetime Achievement Award at our 2020 meeting in Vegas for the National Wildlife Control Operators Association. So he is truly a legend. And then, of course, the Smiths with Tomahawk Live Trap, they've really done a lot of interesting things with that company in the last several years. But Truth in Advertising, folks, I have business relationships with both of those companies, so that just so everyone knows. Nevertheless, that's where they can go to your website, sky-hawk.com. They can contact Wildlife Control Supplies, Tomahawk Live Trap. As we're wrapping up here, how do we, anything about the future? You're able to talk anything about the future products?
Yeah, everybody understands. This trap went up 1-to-1 subscription basis for an individual trap. It has a lot of value for people that are trapping, but the real big application is going to be the hub-based technologies, especially for pest control. We have it's interesting that we have users now that are using this for mouse and rat trapping, and
really?
there's ways to trying to remember his name. I'm very bad with names, but Eichmann. Is his last name?
Okay.
Abracadabra, and he's come up with some very creative ways where he hooks one Skyhawk up to multiple mouse traps and put it in a box, and the accelerometer in there is so sensitive it can monitor 5-10 mouse traps or rat traps.
That's cool. That's really cool.
So you basically split your subscription of. Now that also is going to be done through local RF technology, and we understand that there are a lot of other large companies such as Bayer and stuff that are developing pest control applications. And trust me, we're going to be there. We're going to be there shortly. And our goal and our edict is to make it simple. It's got
right.
Simplicity is going to be the key to this, so it's easy to set up and low cost. And we have the ability, the hardware. A lot of these other companies have been involved. They're not electronic companies,
right?
And we've been involved in making BlackBerry phones and barcode readers and all kind of different things for 25 years, and we know how to produce things in volume for very low cost. So we are going to have some easy to deploy, low cost solutions for the pest management section of this too, and it's pretty exciting what's coming. The world's going to change.
Yeah, I think the hub technology is really going to be helpful. Because when I do trainings and I try to talk to wildlife control operators and PCOs, I tell them, look, if you're going to set up a job, my recommendation is always set 3 traps. You can set more, of course, but 3 for the average household is like, for me, is like a minimum. If you're going to do a raccoon job, you want 3 traps. So, because you want to get that job over as soon as possible. So technology that would allow a single unit to monitor several traps would be really a nice advance in that technology. Have any thoughts about having a photographic element, like a video or photograph element in your technology in the future? Because that would be one way to do it. You can put your 3 traps within visual sight of the device.
Well, yes.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Yes, there you go. There you have it, folks. You heard it here first.
Yeah, and with the goal there, our product will be focused on just identification, and that it doesn't. It's one thing to take pretty pictures, but really the requirement is a picture that's good enough to let you know what's in the trap.
Right.
And one of the things that's important to keep the cost of this down and to make it easy is low bandwidth and not worrying about real high quality pictures.
Right. Yes.
So
I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's because you're just wanting to know, is the trap, is there something caught or something not caught? And that's really, because if you haven't caught anything, then you don't need to check the trap, right?
And we can, even with our existing technology, we know that, because in virtually all cases, we know you get the first indication from the trap door closing, then you get additional movements right after that, because they kind of go nuts at the beginning until they get tired out and take a nap. And so you really, the trappers that have used this, our experience has been that people have gotten 1 or 2 of these, then they've come back and gotten 5 or 10 of them. I have one pest control operator, actually my pest control operator down in Florida. He didn't do much trapping, did a little bit of trapping, and I gave him, a good friend of mine, I'd known him for 10 years. I gave him one of the devices, and I said, "You're not going to want to spray anymore. You're going to want to, you're going to want to be trapping." And you know what? That's what he's done. He's hired somebody. He's just a little one-of operator.
Yeah.
And now he's hired somebody to do his insect control stuff, and he's just spending his time trapping because he loves it.
He caught the bug. The bug.
Yeah. So
Mr. Shevelow, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't discussed here as we're wrapping up?
No, I wasn't quite sure how I'd get a half hour in, but that didn't seem.
Yeah, I told you, you had to have faith. We would get it out. So yeah, we've been going for almost probably 45 minutes or so, maybe 50. So
Yeah.
I have actually 47, almost 48 minutes here.
Okay, so stay tuned. There'll be a lot more coming out. We intend, we actually have reserved a large booth for the Pest World. We attended Pest World in San Diego last year, and our small booth was quite overwhelmed at the beginning. And we have a rather large booth and intend on displaying a lot at October in Pest World in Nashville, I believe. And I hope that I hope things are straightened out by then, that happens, because we have, it's kind of a different time right now, but
it is.
It won't last forever, and we're taking the time. Fortunately, a lot of what we're doing, because we have the ability to design things and produce things and prototype things and produce things all in-house in our factory in Derry, New Hampshire. And we're taking this time, keeping everybody employed and taking the opportunity to really do some heavy development efforts. And in the meantime, we're selling our Skyhawk Kiwis, which is our first unit, the Kiwi. But there's going to be a lot of other products for the pest control industry in particular under the Skyhawk brand. And after that, there's going to be a lot of other different vertical applications that benefit from being able to place a battery-operated device out in the field and monitor things. Things such as boats, self-storage units, and a whole bunch of different other applications. The world's going to change, and it's going to be driven by what the cellular carriers launched a few years ago.
Wow.
So.
Well, folks, you've learned a lot about Skyhawk Kiwi device today. Check it out on sky-hawk.com. Well, we want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank you, Mr. Shevelow, for being on the Pest Geek podcast and the Living in Wildlife segment. I'm Stephen Van Tassel, Living with Wildlife, the Pest Geek podcast. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. Drop me a line at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Do take the time to check out sky-hawk.com. Maybe it's something you want to add to your business. Check it out. And of course, more stuff is coming. Mr. Shevelow, thank you for being on our show. We do hope you will come back again in the future when some of those new products come out. So I do hope you'll join us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.